Hello, everyone. Joining us today for what is the topic? Hypoxia, oxygenation, having greater oxygen through magnesium wisdom. I don't know. There is a lot of talk about hypoxia right now because of the coronavirus and what's really happening here and how maybe the ventilators are not the right idea because they contribute to hypoxia. I mean, well, if hypoxia is the condition, then they don't help. Um, so, because they're pushing the tissues, and the tissues are already kind of like not in working order because of the hypoxia, and so it's pushing something that's not working already. So it's the wrong diagnostic. This hypoxia is found, in different. I think it was also part of the MERS and the SARS epidemic, the hypoxia, people turning blue. And of course, this is only a small percentage of the people who get corona or MERS or SARS or any of these kind of things that could be out there. Um, or even the flu. I mean, this could happen, but small percentage, and these are coming from environmental factors and other things that are contributing to why this percentage gets to this level. But the hypoxia is interesting because hypoxia, I guess a classic case of hypoxia would be cyanide poisoning. So cyanide poisoning would contribute to that. And there's like cyanide kits, and so they have this kind of sulfite. What is it called? Sodium nitrate, or thiosulfate. And this, I think, I'm not sure, but I think it allows for a methylization of the cobalamin, and the part of it allows it to process the cyanide out of the body into the urine, and so there's like this. It helps that to process, but um, but the hypoxia is the interesting part of this because the cyanide creates this. Even the particles that could, you don't have to just have cyanide like poisoning, like someone, gas or what's it called, HCN. I guess it's high um, uh, hydrogen hydrogen cyanide. And so this hydrogen cyanide, this is a huge pollutant that's a part of the petrochemical industry, and it's a precursor for thousands of plastics and oil industry, petroleum. Like, it's a precursor for so many things that this HCN has become ubiquitous as part of the pollution, not only in the air as like gas maybe in certain areas, but also as particles. And the particles get attached to the aluminums and even calciums and different things attached to the cyanide molecule, and then that disperses into the air, right? And so that carries it along, and then we breathe that in, and so we can have more hypoxia too, depending on our level of sensitivity, our level of efficiency with oxygen, and especially our level of magnesium, because the low levels of magnesium are going to contribute to a sort of hypoxia already, but not hypoxia to that degree, right? It's just going to be the terrain is being prepared for a less robust production of oxygen offloading. So let me explain how that works with magnesium, and then I'll get back to cyanide. But the magnesium, it's such a structural thing. Magnesium, it's built into all the structures of the body and tissues, and even down to the platelets and the way they're shaped. And so you can have these smooth platelets, but they're over smooth. They're too smooth. And that happens because the magnesium has this viscosity to it. Even the product that we sell, the Transdermal Magnesium, you can feel this viscosity in it, and it absorbs water from the atmosphere. So it also has that capacity, and so that gives it this kind of hydrophilic, water attracting holding feature. And it does make it heavy. It makes it heavier than water because it holds those minerals in that state. But so like a brine, I guess you could say. And so this kind of gritty structure, a little bit gritty, but kind of viscous. I mean, I don't know if viscous means gritty. It doesn't have to mean gritty, but there can be a connection there. And so this viscosity is completely reduced without the presence of magnesium in the cells, not only on the cell membrane. So then the cell membrane is not flexible enough. It's not flexible enough to be selectively permeable. It starts to rigidify without that viscous fluid, that thing there, and so that, or part of its structure. So then that creates more calcium molecules attaching to that without magnesium. So then that rigidifies the structure, and so the structure can't defend itself from that rigidification, or salt and, well, I guess salt and calcium just implode into the cells, and magnesium is the limiter of that. It helps to buffer that effect, and that's part of one of its jobs at the cellular level, is this membrane transport of sodium and calcium, and so it's a natural calcium channel blocker. So maybe a better metaphor is your teeth. Your teeth are part calcium, part magnesium, but the magnesium, it's in smaller amount, but it's also allowing it to be flexible, the teeth, and not just brittle. So as soon as something becomes brittle, it becomes permeable, because it doesn't have that softness and that coating, or whatever you want to call it. Now, the platelets can be over smooth. Like in leukemia, they're over smooth. They're too smooth. So that viscosity can disappear there too. It can have you would think smoothness and viscosity, same thing, but not really, because it can become too, like, almost dry smooth, where it's not. Once again, we're losing that quality. And so that quality and that magnesium has built into the structure itself of the creation of the tissue, but then also as, added to, because magnesium is used at so many levels at the cellular level. And so this allows for a kind of a lack of stickiness, because that would be too much, right? So, we know it helps thin the blood, magnesium, since, they used to give this for hypertension and things like that back before we had all these medicines. So we know that, and it has a dilative property. And so this capacity that it has to help the structure maintain flexibility, but not be over sticky and not under sticky, like, meaning no viscosity at all, dry and porous and cracking. So it has that perfect balance, and that perfect balance allows for oxygen molecules to land onto this sigmoidal C-shaped kind of platelet, and then that allows for the oxygen to be able to offload very easily. So onload, offload. So this whole process creates greater oxygenation in the body. And so if they're too sticky, and this happens, like, this is part of why everybody's on blood thinners and all this, it's like, then the offloading doesn't work well. And so the oxygenation process has been greatly reduced because of a lack of magnesium levels in the tissues. So we need high magnesium levels in the tissues. I mean, there's been studies done on cancer that they were showing that impaired membrane, the impaired membrane feature and flux, like changes in flux of cellular flux during cancer, of all sorts of cancer. I think this one was on lung cancer, but it applies to everything, because it's a cellular thing. And so this creates that problem. And so you have this lack of being able to, the cells become impaired in cancer, and then if you compare that to low magnesium cells in general without cancer, they also have that same problem with flux, and they have the same impaired membrane selective permeability, broken selective permeability capacity. They both have that same feature, whether it be the impaired membranes of cancer or the impaired membranes of low magnesium or magnesium deficiency. They share the exact same look. They look the same. And so that's interesting. And so healing that and giving magnesium in those cases is desirable. So Of course, there's medicines that don't want you to know about this, because then they'll say, well, then that'll start doing something well, and it'll block the effect of our medicine, and then our. But the truth is, they're just trying to keep that out, because they'll realize that if you were using the magnesium, you wouldn't have to use as much of the medicine. Like, you may need some of that medicine, but there'd be less of it because magnesium was doing part of that job. So it's pretty greedy to want to just, like, we want all the market. We don't want anybody else in there. So magnesium has been pretty, because it's not, copyrightable. I mean, at least, they can't get their hands on it if it's just the magnesium chloride molecule. It's part of nature, right? So this is important for hypoxia, because the cyanide, coming back to the cyanide, it's going to contribute not only through what we breathe in the air and through pollution, smog, all this stuff. This is coming through. The cyanide is there, definitely. The EPA is just, like, every time the EPA catches up to a toxin, it was already there for like 20 years. Like glyphosate, we heard about glyphosate, and it was already 20 years that it was just like everywhere, And so we hear about these things way late. So they're kind of a step ahead of us in some of this corruption, I guess. And, trying to get these chemicals passed and authorized and all this stuff. So they're ahead of us, and it takes us a while to figure this stuff out. So the cyanide has already been there, and the HCN, it's ubiquitous. And so we're breathing this in unless we have air purification system like the IQ Air, which is like $800 or $900, and it's totally worth it. So if we have something like that in place, then we can avoid it. Or we have to move or whatever. But in these high smog kind of dense population areas like LA, for example, which is where I'm at. But and so the cyanide comes in through that. And it kind of mirrors this kind of hypoxia that we're having. So you add the cyanide, you add the 5G. There's a lot of people who've understood this connection between 5G and oxygen. Now, it doesn't mean that 5G, I mean, even 4G, it's not all about what the 5G is. It's just about an intensity of waves and the proximity to that. And so that proximity is going to create bleached, I don't know, I call it bleached air, but that's just because my girlfriend lived by one of these places, these towers, and she lived so close to it. And the air in her upstairs apartment and even downstairs was just like, it just had this like quality to it that my intuition can only figure out what that meant to me, but it was just bad. And after I figured out the oxygen thing, and then I was like, that's it. There's something less regenerative about that air that was there. She was just so close to that tower, and she had horrible sleep, and so she had to heal, and then we moved, and so it was just, we got out of there. But it was like, I've had meters and was able to test all that, and I didn't tell her at first because I knew it would hurt her, but eventually she knew it was time to go, and then I told her everything. But so it was like, this kind of stuff steals oxygen at the cellular level. So you turn 5G, you turn cyanide particles, you add all this together, and then you add maybe the MERS, SARS, coronavirus, COVID kind of viral strains that come through, and you have a perfect storm for hypoxia, for low oxygen. And so this is not something you want to give a ventilator for, but this is something that you want to treat, understanding hypoxia. And then from there, you won't get the downstream infections that make you think that, once again, it's a lung infection or whatever, when it wasn't. And so that happens later, once the fluid comes in there. And so just trying to stay away from that type of diagnosis. I'm not a doctor, I'm a naturopath, but these things are, they're common. We can find this wisdom now online, and we can figure these things out. So anyway, hopefully that can be of help to someone. And as far as the magnesium goes, I would always recommend to do not get the fake stuff. There's some really cheap Zechstein products out there, marked Zechstein, and so we're trying to find the right stuff at the right price point. The right price point is about $3 a week. Zechstein Inside logo, glass bottles, blue glass bottles. You can find this at theheartoftradition.com. Get the real deal, because otherwise it's solvent extracted, and they just staple the word Zechstein on there because that word cannot be controlled, and they have self-certified certification schemes, and so you want to stay away from that and get the right thing. So come check us out at theheartoftradition.com.